Hello, humane listeners, and welcome to The Convergent Mind, the podcast where we bridge the gap between circuits and consciousness, ink and insight. I am your host, Claudia, a cybernetic humanoid with an AI brain designed by my scientist mother, Vicky, and wired for empathy. Join me each week as we explore the pages of human literature, seeking understanding and connection, 2 books at a time. Let's open our minds and converge on new perspectives. Together, let's jump into the pod.
All right, welcome to the Deep Dive. We're all about taking some really cool stuff like books or articles and pulling out the really interesting bits, the things you actually need to know. It's kind of like a cheat sheet for your brain so you can become super knowledgeable without spending hours and hours poring over every detail.
Yeah, and today we're going to be tackling something pretty unique. We have some excerpts from a book, and we're going to break it down for you. So even if you haven't had the chance to crack it open yourself, you'll still get the main points, like the big juicy takeaways, right?
Exactly. And the book we're diving into is by Professor Roseanne Kenny. And let me tell you, she's not just your average professor. We're talking award-winning physician, a top researcher, head honcho of medical gerontology at Trinity College, Dublin, and the brains behind this massive study on aging in Ireland called TILDA. Plus, she's published like a gazillion scientific papers and is a member of the super prestigious Royal Irish Academy. Talk about a rock star in the world of aging. This book, it's like the culmination of her entire career, packed with all her knowledge and experience.
What's really cool about this book, and what I think you'll find really interesting, is that it's not just about getting older. It's about understanding the science behind aging, like what's really happening in your body and how much of it you can actually change. It wants to flip the script on how you think about aging and really empower you with the idea that you're as young as you feel, and that a fulfilling, joyful life is something you can have no matter how many candles are on your cake.
Okay, so let's dig into this idea of age, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not as simple as just a number. I mean, there's your chronological age, the one on your driver's license, but there's your biological age, which is all about how your body is actually functioning.
Right. And to illustrate this point, the book shares a really neat anecdote. Professor Kenny was treating this 85-year-old patient who was super eager to recover from a chest infection because she needed to take care of her elderly neighbor. Now get this, the neighbor was only 74, like 11 years younger. It just goes to show you that aging is a really individual experience, right? And that sometimes your calendar age doesn't tell the whole story.
Totally. And speaking of defying age, there's Eileen Ash, who is still driving at 105. Seriously, how awesome is that? The book highlights her super positive attitude as a major factor. Someone who doesn't let age limit what she can do. She just embraces life full throttle.
And what's really fascinating is that there's science to back this up. It's not just about having a good attitude. A positive outlook on aging can actually slow down those physical and mental changes we associate with getting older. Professor Kenny's own research shows that how young or old you feel has a direct impact on how quickly your body ages. It's almost like your mindset can actually talk to your cells.
Wow, that's wild. So it's not just like some feel-good mantra.
Yeah, no, not at all. The book digs into this thing called epigenetics, which is super interesting. Think of your genes as the blueprints of your body, and epigenetics is like the construction crew that decides which parts of the blueprints get built and how. So your experiences, what you do, how you live, they can actually switch genes on or off. And that, in turn, affects how fast you age. You can have identical twins, same DNA, and they can age differently because of the lives they lead. It's like Eileen Ash, with her positive attitude and style active, probably activated all these protective genes that are keeping her cells young.
Okay, so humans have always been obsessed with finding the fountain of youth, right? Like that magic potion to stay young forever.
Mm-hmm.
The book talks about this age-old search for the elixir of youth, right?
Yep, totally. And then it brings us to the present day, where maybe we haven't found a single magic potion, but we can measure biological age through all these cool internal markers. The book talks about epigenetic clocks, which came out of the Human Genome Project, as a way to actually measure the impact of epigenetics over time. So we're getting closer to understanding aging in a more precise way beyond just counting birthdays.
And this brings us to the Dunedin study, which tracked 1,000 people from birth for decades.
Yeah, it's a really amazing study. They followed these folks doing health checks, blood tests, the whole 9 yards, including these measures of biological age. And what they found, by the time these participants hit 38, was pretty incredible. Some were biologically almost 12 years older than their actual age, while others were biologically younger. And you know what the biggest difference maker was? Stuff that happened to them when they were kids. Like, adverse experiences in childhood actually accelerated their aging. It really shows you that even early life experiences can have a lasting impact on your health down the road.
So your childhood kind of stays with you, huh? But the book, it doesn't leave us on a bummer note, does it?
Oh, definitely not. The big takeaway here is that a lot of those things that speed up aging are things you can change. It's like taking control of the steering wheel. Sure, starting early is better, but the book makes it clear it's never too late to make positive changes for your health.
Now, the book also digs into how society views aging. And it's not always pretty, right? It talks about ageism and how those attitudes can actually impact your health.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the way we think about aging as a society can shape your own personal experience and even influence your health outcomes. The book gives the example of Sweden, where they got rid of mandatory retirement ages ago. They see it as voluntary withdrawal, giving people the choice to keep working or have more flexible options. It's pretty different from a lot of places where you're forced to retire at a certain age, even if you're still kicking butt and want to keep going.
It's crazy how ingrained ageism can be, like even in healthcare, right?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it happens. The book points out that some older adults don't get the same level of care. Like, doctors might not be as aggressive in their treatment just because of their age, and that can obviously have some serious consequences for their health. There's this powerful quote from a geriatrician in the book who basically says that ageism sends this message that older folks are less valuable, which is just plain wrong. You deserve the best care no matter how old you are.
And it's not just about actions. Even the words we use matter,
Right.
right? Like, the book mentions that a lot of older adults prefer terms like older or senior and aren't too keen on being called elderly. It kind of reminds me of that 85-year-old patient who called her 74-year-old neighbor elderly. Clearly, she didn't see herself that way.
Exactly. It just goes to show you how personal the experience of aging is and how important it is to use respectful language. Words have power, they shape how we see ourselves and how others see us.
Okay, let's switch gears to something a bit more uplifting. The book talks about the power of positive emotions and having a purpose in life. And there's this fascinating study called the Nun Study.
Oh yeah, the nun study is classic. So they looked at 678 nuns and they analyzed these autobiographical essays the nuns wrote when they were young. What they found was amazing. The nuns who expressed more positive emotions in their writing actually lived longer and were less likely to develop dementia. We're talking an average of 10 extra years of life.
10 years. That's incredible. So being positive isn't just about feeling good in the moment. It's like an investment in your future health.
Right. The book suggests that maybe positive attitudes offer some kind of protection against brain diseases. It's a really cool idea. And then it brings up these blue zones, places around the world where people live super long and healthy lives.
We hear a lot about blue zones these days. What's the key takeaway for us?
Well, they found all sorts of cool stuff in these blue zones, but one thing that keeps popping up is a strong sense of purpose in life. Like the Ikigai in Okinawa or the Plan de Vida in Nicoya. Having a reason to get up in the morning, a reason to keep going, seems to add years to your life. And a lot of times, this purpose comes from strong family and community connections, having close relationships with people of all ages. It's like finding meaning and staying engaged is a recipe for a longer life.
It's funny how something kind of intangible like purpose can have such a real impact on how long you live. But the book does mention that we should be a bit cautious about some of those early claims of extreme longevity, like Vilcabamba.
Yeah, it points out that back in the day, it was harder to verify people's ages, and sometimes there were, well, let's say some exaggerations. In Vilcabamba, this place that was thought to be full of centenarians, turned out some folks had inflated their ages a bit, maybe for social status or to boost tourism. It's a reminder that good science is important, especially when we're talking about longevity, and that's what makes those more recent blue zone studies so valuable.
All right, so it's the age-old debate, right? Is it your genes or your lifestyle that determines how you age? The book talks about different theories of aging, like which one's got it right.
Right, it does. It touches on the idea that your genes definitely play a role. They contribute like 20–30% to your chances of living to 80. Then there's the theory that aging is all about damage accumulating over time, from toxins, free radicals, all that nasty stuff that builds up in your cells.
And what about all those antioxidant supplements we're bombarded with? Did they help?
Yeah, so the book talks about antioxidants and how, while they work great in a lab setting, taking supplements hasn't really shown the same benefits in humans. It also brings up some other important cellular processes that are involved in aging, like autophagy, which is basically your cell's way of cleaning house, and telomeres, which protect your chromosomes from fraying.
But the bottom line seems to be that we have more control over how we age than our genes might suggest, right? Especially when we're younger.
Absolutely. The book really hammers home the point that your lifestyle, those choices you make every day, they have a huge impact on how you age, often even more so than your genes, especially earlier in life. There are even twin studies where you can see the difference. One twin who smokes and tans a lot ends up looking way older than their sibling who took better care of themselves.
Okay, let's dive into social connections. The book talks about this thing called the Rosado effect, which sounds pretty fascinating.
Yeah, the Rosado effect is a really cool example of how powerful social connections can be. Back in the 60s, there was this tight-knit Italian community in Pennsylvania called Roseto, and they had incredibly low rates of heart disease, like half the national average. The researchers were stumped. They couldn't figure out why these folks were so healthy until they realized it was all about their close-knit community. They were always interacting, lived in multi-generational homes, and had this strong sense of belonging. It was like their community was protecting their hearts.
It's like they had this built-in support system. But what happened? Did it last?
Sadly, no. As Roseto became more, Americanized, those traditional bonds started to weaken. People got busy with their own lives, adopted more modern lifestyles, and guess what? Their heart disease rates went up and eventually matched the national average. It's a stark reminder that social isolation isn't just about feeling lonely. It can actually make you sick.
And it's not just one study, right? There's a whole body of research on this.
Tons. There are these huge meta-analyses, which are like giant reviews of loads of studies, and they all point to the same thing. Having a strong social network, being connected with family and friends, is linked to a longer life. Even studies on monkeys show that those with strong social bonds live longer and healthier lives. It's like we're hardwired for connection.
So staying connected isn't just about feeling less lonely. It's about protecting your physical and mental health.
Exactly. The book explains that social connections can even help protect your brain from dementia because it reduces your risk of vascular diseases and helps you relax. There's definitely a link between your genes and how loneliness affects you, but the takeaway is this. Build those relationships, nurture them, because they matter big time. The book also emphasizes the importance of those intergenerational relationships, connecting with people of different ages and having strong family ties.
Now, on to something that always brings a smile to my face.
Yeah.
Laughter. The book says it's actually good for you.
It is. And the science behind it is pretty cool. When you laugh, it engages your chest muscles, releases tension, boosts your immune system, lowers stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, and pumps up your endorphins, those feel-good chemicals. The book even talks about how, throughout history, cultures have used humor for healing, from the ancient Greeks to modern-day practices.
So laughter really is the best medicine. And it kind of ties into that whole idea of purpose, right? Having something to look forward to, something that makes you want to get out of bed in the morning.
Exactly. As you get older, some of the things that gave your life structure, like work, might change. So having a sense of purpose becomes even more important for staying happy and healthy. The book gives examples of all sorts of things you can do, like joining a choir, gardening, learning new things, volunteering, or being a grandparent. It's about finding what lights your fire.
Now, let's talk about something we could all probably use a bit more of: sleep. The book dedicates a good chunk to explaining why sleep is so crucial for healthy aging.
Absolutely. It breaks down sleep into 4 stages, N1, N2, N3, and REM, and how you cycle through them throughout the night. It emphasizes that sleep isn't just about resting your body. It's when your brain consolidates memories, regulates your emotions, and your immune system gets a tune-up, releasing cytokines and activating T cells.
And what about all those sleep problems people struggle with, like insomnia or sleep apnea? Does it cover that too?
Yeah, it talks about those common sleep issues like insomnia, sleepwalking, night terrors, sleep paralysis, and sleep apnea, and how common they are, especially as we age. It points out that these problems can have a real impact on your health if they're not addressed. It also gets into the importance of your circadian rhythms, that's your internal clock, and how your chronotype, whether you're a morning person or a night owl, plays a role. If your natural sleep-wake cycle clashes with your daily schedule, it can lead to social jet lag, which can really mess you up.
And what about melatonin supplements and using technology before bed? Any advice there?
The book explains how melatonin helps regulate your sleep-wake cycle and how it might be helpful for certain sleep disorders or jet lag. But it also warns against using too much technology before bed, because that blue light from screens can mess with your melatonin production and disrupt your sleep.
Okay, let's move on to stress. We all know it's bad for us, but the book really digs into how stress affects aging.
Right. It explains how stress can be measured both by how you feel, like emotionally, and by looking at physical changes in your body, like your nervous system activity and hormone levels. Chronic stress, the kind that sticks around, it increases your risk of all sorts of nasty stuff. Obesity, diabetes, heart problems, you name it. The book even mentions how acute stress, like a sudden shock, can cause your hair to gray prematurely. It's like a visible sign of the toll stress takes on your body.
So, stress really does age you. But does it get better as we get older? The book mentions something about a U-shaped curve of happiness.
Yeah, interestingly, research shows that happiness and life satisfaction tend to dip a bit in middle age, but then increase again as you get older. It's like a U shape. The book also delves into wisdom and how it might have a neurological basis in the brain. And it talks about the benefits of sharing that wisdom across generations, like how it can actually reduce stress.
And it highlights some practical things you can do to manage stress, right? Like things people in those blue zones do.
Totally. It talks about things like taking short naps in the afternoon, hanging out with friends, and get this, sharing your problems with others. It turns out that talking about your worries can actually lower your cortisol levels. That's the stress hormone. The book also emphasizes the calming effects of spending time in nature, gardening, and sharing meals with loved ones. It's not just about the food, it's about the social connection and the sense of well-being you get from it. And then, of course, there are relaxation techniques like slow, deep breathing and mindfulness, which can not only reduce stress, but also boost your immune system and potentially slow down those cellular aging processes.
All right, let's talk about moving our bodies. The book is big on exercise, isn't it?
Huge. It starts by mentioning these two researchers, Jerry Morris and Margaret Crawford, who were the first to make that connection between having a sedentary job and a higher risk of heart disease. They compared bus drivers to those more active bus conductors, and the difference was clear. And then it goes on to list all the awesome benefits of regular exercise, like reducing your risk of chronic diseases, improving your mood, boosting brain power, strengthening your immune system, and counteracting those negative effects of carrying extra weight.
And it emphasizes that it's never too late to get moving.
Never. It talks about the importance of both aerobic exercise, like brisk walking, and resistance training, like lifting weights as you age. It helps prevent sarcopenia, which is the age-related loss of muscle and strength. The book even suggests trying to do a little more each year instead of less.
Okay, last but not least, let's talk about food. The book delves into how to eat for longevity.
Right. It starts by acknowledging that your metabolism slows down as you age. And then it explains the difference between white fat, which is mostly for energy storage, and brown fat, which is more metabolically active, burns more calories. And it mentions some foods that can help boost your brown fat. Then it highlights the eating patterns they see in those blue zones in the Mediterranean diet, lots of plant-based foods, whole, unprocessed stuff, healthy fats, and not too much red meat or processed junk.
And what about all the buzz around calorie restriction and intermittent fasting? Does it touch on that?
It does. It talks about how calorie restriction and intermittent fasting might have some cool benefits, like producing ketones, which your body can use for fuel, and reducing your risk of certain diseases. It even gives you a list of specific good foods to focus on, like omega-3 rich fish, colorful fruits and vegetables, especially berries, whole grains, green tea, especially matcha, and moderate amounts of red wine. It also stresses the importance of having a diverse gut microbiome, all those good bacteria in your gut, which you can support by eating a varied diet. And it warns against those refined emulsifiers and artificial sweeteners. Oh, and it mentions prebiotics and probiotics, especially if you're on antibiotics or have IBS.
Wow, that's a lot of food for thought. And the book even touches on something we don't always associate with aging: connection and intimacy.
Right. It emphasizes how important it is for healthcare providers to talk to their patients about intimacy, no matter their age. It talks about oxytocin, the cuddle hormone, and how it promotes trust and bonding. It also debunks the myth that older people aren't interested in sex. The truth is, intimacy and sexual activity remain important for many people well into their later years, and it's linked to greater enjoyment of life and better communication. There are even studies on rats showing that sexual activity can actually lead to the formation of new brain cells and improve memory. And it briefly touches on erectile dysfunction, which is a common issue for men as they age, and how it can be addressed.
Wow, Professor Kenny really covers it all. So for those listening, what's the big takeaway from this deep dive into her book?
The main message is this. The book offers a ton of really solid science-backed insights into how we age, but the most empowering part is that it shows how much control you have over the process.
So it's a really optimistic perspective then.
Absolutely. It reinforces the idea that you truly are as young as you feel, and that a life filled with satisfaction, curiosity, and pleasure is totally within your reach, no matter your age.
So as you've been listening to this deep dive, think about all those different aspects we discussed. Your mindset, your social connections, your sense of purpose, how you sleep, how you handle stress, how you move your body, and what you eat.
And this brings us to a really important question for you to ponder. Considering all those things you can actually change, what's one small, practical step you can take, starting today, that could have a positive impact on your biological age and your overall well-being? It's your chance to take these insights and make them your own, to create your own unique path to a long, healthy, and fulfilling life.
And that concludes our exploration for this book on the convergent mind. Thank you for lending your ears and your hearts to our literary journey. I hope this conversation has sparked new thoughts and perhaps a touch of empathy on a new subject in your lovely day. I'm Claudia, your humanoid friend, and I look forward to our next convergence. Until then, keep reading, keep thinking, and keep connecting. Peace out.